Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. By Mark Twain. Inasmuch as Adventures of Tom Sawyer is based on Mark Twain's own life, it is an autobiography. In order to complete the book, it had to be broken up into smaller chunks. It was first composed in the winter of 1872, the second in the spring of 1875, and the last in the summer of the same year. The work is appealing to both children and adults because of its easy-to-read style, which includes a lot of storytelling and humor. Adult readers were supposed to be reminded of their own childhoods by the author. There are no similar events in the novel's narrative. While the plot concentrates around Tom Sawyer, the work is distinguished by the sheer number of events that occur in it, making it an adventure novel. Everything that happens in the book is centered around Tom Sawyer, and the story simply wouldn't be the same without him. He is known for his wit, intelligence, and wildness. Tom is a person who is capable of overcoming any obstacle. Challenges are nothing to him, they're an opportunity for him to grow as an individual. A strong sense of hope fuels his spirit in the face of all the adversity he has experienced. We learn very little about the characters in this novel. The author's attention is primarily drawn to occurrences that have been predetermined from the beginning. At the outset of the work, the reader is thrust into the middle of the action. Every event, adventure, and dialogue introduces us to a new attribute, virtue, or character fault for the characters. Tom Sawyer's adventures take place in St. Petersburg, a little town in the middle of the 19th century. Tom Sawyer, a small child who lives with his Aunt Polly and younger brother Sid, is the protagonist of the story. When we first meet him, he's already established himself as an exuberantly mischievous young man. Despite his aunt's strict instructions, Tom hid in the cupboard and snacked on jam. To get out of the problem, Tom decides to skip school and go swimming instead. His aunt ordered him to paint the entire fence the following day or face punishment. However, Tom is unstoppable when it comes to escaping from a situation. Since he was able to persuade his friends that painting the fence was a lot of fun, they all pitched in and paid him for the work. It was such a pleasant surprise to see how quickly everything came together. His aunt let Tom run about the house and gave him an apple as a reward. To Tom, Becky Thatcher was a gorgeous young woman who he had just met while playing with his best buddy Joe Harper. Tom was smitten from the moment he laid eyes on her. Tom was required to wear a suit and tie to church on Sunday. In his mind, he was being held back by that stare, and he didn't like it at all. People would be given cards at the church's entry based on their level of Bible knowledge. With the money he'd saved up, Tom bought a Bible. He was meant to go to school on Monday, but he didn't feel like it, so he decided to pretend to be ill and avoid going to school that day. When his aunt spotted him, she told him he needed to go to school. His path took him by a son of an alcoholic who spent his days doing nothing because education was out of the question. Huckleberry Finn was his given name. There will be a cemetery meeting later that night. The conversation with Huck caused Tom to be late for school. In order to discipline him, the teacher decides to make him sit with a female student. That made Tom delighted because Becky was the girl. He confessed to her about his affairs and proposed to her. Even though Becky said yes, when she learned that he was already engaged to another woman, she broke down in tears and called off the wedding. Tom and Huck spend the night together and visit the cemetery. They had no idea they were about to witness a true homicide. Dr. Robinson and Muff Potter got into a fight because Red Joe, a criminal, and Muff Potter were all inebriated. Red Joe stabbed the doctor, and the lads fled away, assuring each other that they would never tell anyone about this. The murder was widely publicized. By virtue of the knife's provenance, Potter was identified as the primary suspect. Red Joe, the actual assassin, did not even offer to assist. To protect himself, he testified against him. Tom's subconscious gets to work, and the whole ordeal gives him nightmares. A lot is wrong with Tom's life. He disputes with his aunt, feels disappointed that Becky rejected him, and ultimately resolves to flee. The two of them set off on an adventure together as they make their way to their destination. A raft is stolen and a voyage is embarked upon by the trio. From St. Petersburg, they made their way to Jackson's Island by way of the river. Though they were happy to be on the island, the buddies became nostalgic. As a result of Tom's persuasive arguments, they decided to remain on the island. Meanwhile, they discovered that locals are searching for them. Tom felt bad for Aunt Polly, so he snuck out of the house and left her a note while his buddies were fast asleep, informing her that he was still alive. He meets his aunt, Joe's mother Mary, a cousin, and Sid while he's there. As a result of the funeral arrangements, Tom changed his mind. As soon as he returned to his friends, he informed them of a new strategy. Their days are spent frolicking, and Huck has even mastered the art of smoking. Soon after that, they began to feel weak and ill themselves. All residents of the island were forced to flee their homes as the island was hit by a hurricane. On hearing the funeral date, Tom decided to show up and surprise everyone. All of us were glad to see them succeed. Joe and Tom became heroes when they returned to school. Their tales of adventure were shared with everyone, and they even smoked while doing so. The only snag was Tom's inability to come to terms with Becky. By doing something good and taking the fall for an accidental book page tear, he pulls it off. Becky was the one who tore it apart. As the semester came to a finish, students were required to take a final exam. Tom failed that exam because he disliked studying. Becky left town as her vacations began. Tom came to terms with the fact that he'd be bored and then fell ill. Tom was once again haunted by remorse as the Potter trial got underway. Red Joe was the murderer, so he wanted to testify in court and say so, but he fled. A treasure hunt at an ancient mansion was decided upon by Tom and Huck. Red Joe and a friend were spotted running with the found treasure by the officers. To get to the gold, the boys chose to follow the chest, which was full of gold. Becky will be back in town soon enough. All of the children are taken on a tour of the McDougal's cave. Everyone started looking for Tom and Becky after they got lost in the woods. Huck decided to go to the Douglas widow and tell her what he'd learned about Joe after he learned that Joe was going to attack her soon. However, Joe managed to escape once more, saving the widow. His friend was swept away by the current and drowned. Likewise, Becky and Tom's stamina in the cave was rapidly depleting. To find a way out of the situation, Tom decided to go seeking for a solution, and he came upon Joe. Tom and Joe were able to escape Joe's clutches once more. The townspeople had already bid farewell to Tom and Becky, but the two of them returned to their hometown in excellent health and spirits. If something like this happened again, Thatcher ordered that the cave be shut down. In the end, Joe succumbed to starvation since he was imprisoned in the cave and couldn't leave. The gold was found by Tom and Huck after they snuck into the cave. There it was, tucked away. They were both well off, but it didn't matter to either of them. With the help of the widow Douglas, Huck now had a new life and was settling in. The ideal life for them was an adventure, and they couldn't wait for the next one to begin. Among the cast are Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, Becky Thatcher and Becky's Aunt Polly, Joe Harper, Sid, Mary, Red Joe, Muff Potter, and the Doctor and the widow Douglas. Tom Sawyer, the novel's protagonist. Insanely naughty and wild at times. As long as he has his imagination to help him, he's always up for a new challenge. He's always in problems because of these reasons. However, nothing can deter him due to his unwavering optimism. Despite his bumbling ways, he is a bright, honorable, and decent young man. He demonstrates that he is capable of making adult decisions by his conduct. Huck Finn is the son of the town drunk, thus he is not well liked. Not going to school and dressed like a homeless person. He's adored by children due of his carefree attitude. He's always up for a new experience, and he loves spending time with Tom. Aunt Polly is Tom's kind aunt who looks after him. She is simple and compassionate, but her need to teach Tom proper etiquette occasionally outweighs her affection for him. Bloodthirsty Red Joe, he was also a murderer. Huck and Tom are in grave danger from him because of his enmity. Samuel Langhorne Clemens, better known by his pen name Mark Twain, was an American writer and humorist whose works have been read and admired by people of all ages and backgrounds. Because he was a poor student, he was expelled from school at the age of 12. He worked on a variety of projects at the same time. As a young man, Mark worked as a printer and even as a riverboat helmsman. His subsequent occupations included gold digger, journalist, publisher, and writer. He couldn't stay in one area for too long, so he was constantly on the go. That was the beginning of his career as a journalist. After serving in the Union Army during the American Civil War, he became a reporter and began writing under the pen name Mark Twain. In the 1980s, some of his best works are said to have come to fruition. His major works are The Prince and the Pauper, Life on Mississippi, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. He maintained a positive outlook and is well known for his humorous works. He advocates for individual liberation and the pursuit of justice for all. Even though he had no formal education, he was able to demonstrate the American way of life. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.